The rain was relentless that night, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Not outside, no, my own heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I remember the exact scent of petrichor rising from the damp asphalt outside our living room window, a smell usually so comforting. Tonight it felt like a suffocating shroud. He was late, again, but this lateness was different. It carried a heavier weight, a suffocating silence that even the downpour couldn't mask. Usually when Dad was late, it was the usual excuses. A client dinner ran over, traffic was a nightmare, the classic workaholic cliches. But tonight the air in our usually warm, cluttered home felt brittle, fractured. Mom sat perched on the edge of the floral sofa, the one she'd painstakingly chosen together with Dad 20 years ago, a lifetime, I always thought, for a sofa to witness. Her fingers were twisting a tissue into a tortured spiral, her eyes fixed on the blank television screen, though I knew she wasn't seeing it. She was listening. Listening for the scrape of his car tires on the driveway, the click of the front door unlocking, the sound of his familiar booming voice that usually filled the house like warm sunshine. But the only sound was the drumming rain and the frantic rhythm of my own blood. I was 16 then, on the cusp of something, though I couldn't quite name it. Awkward limbs, a voice that cracked at unpredictable moments, and a mind that was starting to see the world in shades of gray, not black and white like I once thought. I understood more than I let on, I felt things deeper than I showed. And I felt the tremor in the foundations of our family that night, a sickening lurch that made my stomach clench. He finally arrived, hours after he was supposed to be home for dinner, a dinner Mom had lovingly, painstakingly prepared, even though I knew her appetite had vanished hours ago. The door creaked open and he stood there, silhouetted against the porch light, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, his shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. He didn't boom a greeting. He didn't crack a joke to diffuse the tension, his usual tactic when he was late and knew Mom was simmering. He just stood there. Drained, and then he spoke. His voice was low, gravelly, almost a whisper, a stark contrast to his usual confident timbre. "Margaret," he said, not even looking at Mom, his gaze drifting somewhere over her head, lost in the swirling gray of the storm outside, "we need to talk." Those words, so simple, so ordinary, hung in the air like a death knell. I knew instinctively that whatever was coming next was going to shatter something, irrevocably change the landscape of our lives. I shifted in my armchair, pretending to read the dog-eared paperback in my lap, but my senses were laser-focused, every nerve ending vibrating with anticipation and dread. Mom's breath hitched. Her fingers stilled their destructive dance on the tissue. She finally looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time since he walked in. And in that brief, silent exchange, I saw everything. Years of shared history, of unspoken promises, of love, of resentment, of unspoken hurts, all swirling together in the tense air between them. And then he said it, the words that ripped through the fragile silence like lightning splitting a tree. It's over," he stammered, his gaze finally falling to meet Mom's, but only for a fleeting second before darting away again, shame flickering in his eyes. With her, it's done. Her. Mom's voice was barely a whisper, cracking under the weight of unspoken questions and years of buried suspicions. "Her who, David?" The air thickened, becoming almost palpable, heavy with unspoken accusations and raw vulnerability. He didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, dripping rain onto our Persian rug, his silence screaming louder than any confession. I knew, we all knew. "Elise," he finally choked out, the name sounding foreign and ugly on his tongue. Elise. The name itself was a sharp, elegant stiletto, twisting in the wound of our family's carefully constructed facade. Elise, his mistress, the woman who had been a phantom presence in our lives for how long? Years, I suspected. Years of hushed phone calls, late nights at the office, unexplained expenses, a subtle shift in his demeanor, a growing distance between him and Mom, and by extension between him and me. And in that moment, as the rain continued to lash against the windows, as my father stood dripping and broken, confessing the end of his affair, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't a conscious thought, not at first. It was more of a visceral understanding, a gut feeling, a sudden, sharp clarity that cut through the chaos of the moment. My father had just broken up with his mistress, shattering my mother's world and in the process unwittingly opening up a whole new, terrifying and exhilarating world for me, because Elise wasn't just some random woman. Elise was about to become a very significant part of my life in ways my father could never imagine. The silence that followed Elise was thick enough to choke on. Mom's face, moments ago etched with worry, now crumbled. Not into tears, not yet. Into something far more terrifying, a blankness. Her eyes, which had held such warmth and vibrancy for as long as I could remember, became dull, lifeless, like extinguished embers. It was as if the very essence of her had been sucked out, leaving behind an empty shell. Dad stood there, still dripping, avoiding her gaze, his own face a mask of shame and something else, relief. Was it possible he felt relieved to finally have this ugly secret out in the open, even as it decimated our lives. My own breath hitched in my chest. Elise, the name resonated with a strange familiarity, a ghost echo from conversations overheard, whispers caught on the periphery of my awareness, dismissed then as unimportant adult murmurings. Now those fragments clicked into place, forming a chilling, coherent picture. Elise, she was real. She was here, somewhere out there in our town, maybe even closer than I imagined. And my father had been entangled with her, woven into the fabric of her life, betraying everything he had built with Mom, with us. A wave of nausea rolled over me, a mix of disgust and a strange, unsettling curiosity. Disgust for my father's betrayal, for the ugliness he had brought into our perfect, or so I thought, family, but curiosity about Elise. Who was she? What did she have that my mother did? What kind of woman could pull my stoic, predictable father so completely off course? And then the thought, unbidden, electrifying, what was she like? Not just as the other woman, but as a person. A woman who had captivated my father. A woman who was now abruptly out of his life, and that's when it solidified. The what to do. It wasn't a grand, elaborate plan, not yet. It was an instinct, a pull, a need to know Elise. To see her, to understand her, to unravel the mystery of this woman who had so profoundly disrupted our lives. It was impulsive, reckless, perhaps even morally reprehensible, considering the pain my father had just inflicted on Mom, but it was also compelling, irresistible, a forbidden allure that shimmered in the wreckage of my family's destruction. Mom finally spoke, her voice a hollow rasp, barely audible above the drumming rain. Done. She repeated the word, hanging in the air like a question mark, laced with disbelief and a profound, aching sadness. What do you mean, done, David? Her eyes, still dull, flickered towards him, a flicker of the old Margaret, the woman who demanded answers, the woman who wouldn't be easily placated. Dad shifted his weight, finally meeting her gaze, but his eyes were still clouded with shame, unable to hold her stare for long. I ended it, Margaret, this afternoon. I told her it was over. For good, he said it with a forced finality, but I could hear the tremor beneath the surface, the uncertainty, the lingering something, longing, regret, it was impossible to tell. Why now, David? Mom's voice was gaining strength, the embers in her eyes flickering back to life, fueled by a slow-burning anger. Why, after how long has this been going on? Years, hasn't it? Years of lies, years of sneaking around, years of her. The word her dripped with venom now, a poison unleashed after years of being bottled up. He flinched as if physically struck. It wasn't like that, Margaret, it just happened. And then it went on, I know I hurt you, I'm sorry. Sorry, the most inadequate word in the English language, especially in the face of such profound betrayal. Mom let out a short, bitter laugh devoid of humor. Sorry, is that all you have to say, David? Sorry. You've torn our family apart, you've humiliated me, her voice broke, and for the first time tears welled up in her eyes, glistening in the dim light of the living room. I wanted to go to her, to comfort her, to wrap my arms around her and shield her from the pain my father was inflicting. But I was frozen, rooted to my armchair, my mind racing, consumed by this sudden, overwhelming need to understand Elise, to find her, to see her for myself. It was a selfish, perhaps even cruel impulse in the face of my mother's devastation. But it was there, insistent, undeniable. And as my parents continued to circle each other, locked in their agonizing dance of confession and recrimination, my mind was already formulating a plan. Not a plan to fix my family, not a plan to comfort my mother, not even a plan to confront my father. My plan was simpler, more selfish, and infinitely more dangerous. My plan was to find Elise. And I knew exactly where to start looking. There was a small, unassuming flower shop downtown, Elise's Bloom. I'd seen it countless times, walking home from school, never giving it a second thought. Now the name echoed in my mind, charged with a new, potent significance. Elise's Bloom, it had to be hers. It had to be the place where I would find her. And tomorrow, rain or shine, I would go there, I would see Elise. And then I would know what to do next. The rain continued to fall, washing over the town, washing over our shattered home, washing over me, cleansing me, preparing me for something I couldn't yet name, but something that felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing on the precipice of a vast, unknown landscape. And I was ready to jump. Sunlight, sharp and defiant, sliced through the gloom of the previous night as I woke up. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean, glistening, almost deceptively innocent. But the storm within our house still raged, a silent, simmering tension that permeated every room. Mom was a ghost, moving through the morning routine with a mechanical precision, her eyes still vacant, her voice a muted whisper. Dad had retreated to his study, the door firmly shut, a fortress of solitude and shame. Breakfast was a silent affair, forks scraping against plates, the clinking of glasses echoing in the heavy quiet. I mumbled a goodbye, grabbed my backpack, and escaped the suffocating atmosphere, heading towards the bus stop, my destination not school but downtown. Elise's Bloom. The name played on repeat in my mind, a siren song pulling me towards the unknown. The bus ride was a blur, the familiar route suddenly alien, the faces of my classmates mundane, irrelevant. My thoughts were consumed by Elise, by the image I was building in my head, fueled by snippets of overheard conversations, by the lingering scent of perfume I sometimes caught on my father's clothes, a scent that was Mom's. I imagined Elise to be sophisticated, alluring, perhaps even a little dangerous. A woman who exuded a confidence and freedom that my mother, grounded in the routines of family life, had perhaps lost touch with. I pictured her with dark hair, perhaps like the elegant blooms she likely sold, with eyes that held secrets, a voice that could be both soft and commanding. It was a fantasy, of course, woven from fragments and projections. But the need to see the reality behind the fantasy, to confront the woman who had held my father's heart, was overwhelming. The bus screeched to a halt downtown, and I stepped onto the pavement, the air crisp and cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, ironic considering my destination. Elise's bloom was tucked away on a quieter side street. A small shopfront painted a soft, unassuming lavender, almost blending into the row of older buildings. It wasn't ostentatious, not flashy or overtly seductive like I had somehow imagined Elise herself to be. It was charming. Understated elegance, a quiet beauty that drew you in rather than shouting for attention. A single delicate open sign hung in the window beside a display of vibrant orchids, their petals unfurling like exotic secrets. I hesitated outside the shop, my heart hammering against my ribs, a nervous energy thrumming through my veins. This was it. The moment of truth. To walk inside was to cross a threshold, to step into a world irrevocably connected to the chaos that had engulfed my family. To turn back now would be to remain in the comfortable, albeit fractured, reality I knew, but the pull was too strong. Curiosity, that dangerous, irresistible force, propelled me forward. I took a deep breath, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. The scent hit me first, a heady, intoxicating mix of 1,000 different blooms, from the sweet perfume of roses to the earthy musk of lilies to the clean, green scent of ferns. It was overwhelming, almost intoxicating, a sensory explosion that momentarily disoriented me. The shop itself was small but perfectly formed, every corner filled with carefully arranged bouquets, potted plants, and hanging baskets. Sunlight streamed through the large front window, illuminating the vibrant colors of the flowers, casting dancing shadows on the polished wooden floor. And then I saw her. Behind the counter, arranging a bouquet of sunflowers, stood a woman. Not the dark-haired siren of my imagination. She was softer, lighter. Her hair was a cascade of warm honey blonde, pulled back loosely into a braid that fell over her shoulder. Her eyes were a startling shade of blue, the color of a summer sky framed by delicate, barely there lashes. She was beautiful undeniably, but not in an overtly glamorous way. Her beauty was natural, understated, radiating from within like the soft glow of a pearl. She was wearing a simple floral dress that reached just below her knees, and her movements were graceful, fluid, as she expertly manipulated the sunflowers, her fingers deft and gentle. This was Elise, this serene, almost ethereal woman. She looked nothing like the mistress caricature I had conjured in my mind. She looked kind, vulnerable even. As she turned slightly, arranging the sunflowers in a tall glass vase, I saw her profile. And a jolt went through me, a strange, unexpected recognition. There was something familiar about her face, something in the gentle curve of her cheekbone, the delicate set of her jaw, the way her lips formed a soft, almost melancholic curve. It was Mom. There was a faint, almost imperceptible resemblance to my mother in her features, a subtle echo of the woman I knew and loved. It was unsettling, disorienting, like looking at a distorted reflection, a fractured image of someone familiar yet utterly different. She finished arranging the sunflowers and stepped back, tilting her head, assessing her work with a critical eye. Then she seemed to sense my presence. Her blue eyes lifted, meeting mine across the small space of the shop. And for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Her gaze was direct, open, without suspicion or judgment, just curiosity. A faint smile touched her lips, tentative, questioning. "Can I help you?" Her voice was soft, melodic, with a hint of a gentle lilt, like the chime of wind chimes in a summer breeze. It was nothing like I expected. It was disarming. And in that moment, standing face to face with Elise, the woman who had so disrupted our lives, the woman who bore a strange, faint resemblance to my mother, the woman whose voice was so unexpectedly gentle, I knew with a chilling certainty that my initial plan, my impulsive desire to simply know her, was about to morph into something far more complicated, far more dangerous, and infinitely more intriguing. Because as she stood there, bathed in sunlight and surrounded by the intoxicating scent of flowers, her blue eyes fixed on mine, a new, audacious thought sparked in my mind. A thought that whispered of possibilities, of forbidden desires, of a path far beyond anything I could have imagined just 24 hours ago. And I knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me that this was just the beginning. My father had broken up with his mistress, yes. But my story with Elise was just about to begin. "Can I help you?" Her voice, soft as promised, hung in the air, and for a moment I simply stared, mesmerized. It wasn't just her beauty, it was the unexpected gentleness, the lack of any preconceived judgment in her blue eyes. I had expected, I don't know, defensiveness perhaps, or a brittle hardness, the armor of a woman who had navigated a messy affair. But there was none of that. Just openness, a quiet invitation to connect. My rehearsed lines, the carefully crafted questions I had prepared on the bus, evaporated from my mind, leaving me tongue-tied and suddenly, acutely aware of my own awkwardness. 16, on the precipice of adulthood, yet still feeling like a clumsy, overgrown child facing a woman who exuded a quiet, mature grace. I was just admiring the flowers," I stammered, the words sounding weak and unconvincing even to my own ears. I gestured vaguely towards the orchids in the window, my gaze darting around the shop, avoiding her direct stare. It was a pathetic attempt at normalcy, and I knew she saw right through it, but to my surprise she didn't challenge me. Her smile widened slightly, becoming warmer, more inviting. "They are rather lovely today, aren't they? The phalaenopsis are just in fresh this morning." She stepped away from the sunflowers, moving closer to the counter, her movements still fluid and graceful. The floral scent intensified as she approached, enveloping me in a fragrant cloud that both calmed and heightened my senses. "Is there anything in particular you're looking for, a gift perhaps, or just browsing?" Her voice remained gentle, but there was a subtle undercurrent now, a hint of something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it curiosity, amusement, or something more knowing, something that suggested she sensed the real reason I was here, standing awkwardly in her flower shop? "Browsing?" I managed to croak out again, my voice still wavering. "Just browsing." I forced myself to meet her eyes again, and this time I held her gaze, trying to project an air of nonchalance I definitely didn't feel. Her blue eyes searched mine, and I felt a strange pull, a connection forming between us, unspoken, undefined, yet undeniably present. It was unnerving, yet thrilling. "Well, browse away," she said, her smile softening further, becoming almost motherly. But no, not quite. There was something else in her expression, something that hinted at a deeper understanding, a shared secret, even though we were, for all intents and purposes, strangers. "If you have any questions, just let me know." She turned back to the sunflowers, but I could feel her presence still lingering, a warm, almost palpable energy that filled the small shop. "Just let me know." The words echoed in my mind. An open invitation, or just polite shopkeeperly courtesy? I forced myself to move, to actually browse the flowers, pretending to be interested in the vibrant displays, my mind racing, my heart pounding against my ribs. What to do, how to proceed? My initial plan to simply know her was vague, ill-defined. Now standing here facing her gentle beauty, her unexpected warmth, a new, far more audacious plan was taking shape, solidifying in my mind with terrifying clarity. It was reckless, dangerous, morally questionable, and utterly, irresistibly compelling. I wanted her, not in a purely sexual way, not yet, not entirely. It was more complex than that, more primal. I wanted to possess her, to unravel her, to understand the secret of her allure, the secret that had captivated my father, the secret that seemed to emanate from her very being. And yes, there was a sexual undercurrent, a burgeoning awareness of her as a woman, a beautiful, desirable woman. But it was intertwined with something else, something darker, more complex, born from the wreckage of my family, from the betrayal and pain, from the desperate need to understand the forces that had torn us apart. I wandered aimlessly through the shop, pretending to admire the lilies, the roses, the exotic orchids, my senses heightened, acutely aware of Elise's every movement, every subtle sound she made as she worked behind the counter. The soft rustle of tissue paper, the gentle snip of scissors, the quiet hum of the refrigeration unit, every sound seemed amplified, imbued with a new significance. And then I knew what I had to do. It was audacious, perhaps insane, but it was the only path that felt right, the only path that resonated with the strange, unsettling pull I felt towards her. I would seduce her, not in a crass, predatory way, but subtly, slowly, carefully. I would draw her in, lure her into my world just as she had lured my father into hers. I would become her confidant, her friend, her something more. I would use her vulnerability, her loneliness, perhaps even her lingering feelings for my father to my advantage. It was manipulative, yes, perhaps even cruel, but it was also necessary. Necessary to understand her, to unravel the mystery, to reclaim some semblance of control in the chaotic aftermath of my father's betrayal. And perhaps there was something else too, something darker, something I didn't yet fully understand, even about myself. A desire to punish. To avenge my mother, or simply to explore the forbidden territory, to taste the fruit that had been so alluring to my father, to claim it for myself. The thought swirled in my mind, a confusing, intoxicating cocktail of emotions and desires. I took a deep breath, turned away from the lilies, and walked back towards the counter, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Elise looked up, her blue eyes meeting mine again, her gentle smile still in place. "Find anything you like?" she asked, her voice soft and welcoming. This time I didn't stammer. This time I met her gaze directly, my own eyes holding a new intensity, a newfound purpose. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier now, infused with a confidence I didn't know I possessed, "I was wondering if you could tell me more about those sunflowers. They're really beautiful." It was a simple question, a seemingly innocuous request. But behind the words, behind the polite inquiry about flowers, lay a hidden agenda, a dangerous game about to begin. And as Elise began to tell me about the sunflowers, their symbolism, their vibrant beauty, I knew with a chilling certainty that this was the first step. The first step on a path that would lead me into a world of forbidden desires, tangled emotions, and unpredictable consequences. My father may have broken up with his mistress, but I was just about to embark on a relationship with her. A relationship of my own making, driven by my own complex and conflicted desires. And the scent of sunflowers, sweet and deceptively innocent, filled the air, masking the scent of danger that was already beginning to bloom around us. Elise's voice, as she described the sunflowers, was captivating. She spoke of their symbolism: joy, longevity, adoration, a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions swirling within me. Her words painted pictures of sun-drenched fields in Tuscany, of artists inspired by their vibrant hues, of their resilience, always turning their faces towards the light. It was a small, seemingly innocent lecture on sunflowers, but delivered with such passion and quiet grace that I found myself utterly enthralled. I listened intently, nodding at appropriate moments, asking occasional follow-up questions, all the while subtly studying her, absorbing every detail. The way her brow furrowed slightly when she concentrated, the gentle curve of her lips when she smiled, the way her blue eyes sparkled with genuine enthusiasm when discussing something she loved. Each detail was a brushstroke adding to the already vivid portrait I was forming in my mind. This wasn't just the mistress. This was Elise, a woman with her own passions, her own vulnerabilities, her own story to tell, and I was determined to hear it. As she finished her impromptu sunflower sermon, a comfortable silence settled between us, not awkward but expectant. She looked at me, her blue eyes questioning, inviting further interaction. "So," she said finally, her voice a soft drawl, "are you thinking of taking some sunflowers home with you today?" I hesitated, pretending to consider it for a moment, my mind racing, calculating my next move. Buying sunflowers felt too ordinary, too expected. I needed something more, something that would allow me to prolong this encounter, to deepen the connection that had already begun to spark. "Actually," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, mirroring her gentle one, "I was wondering if you needed any help, here in the shop, with the flowers." The words were out before I fully formulated the thought, driven by pure impulse, a desperate desire to stay, to be near her, to become a part of her world. It was audacious, completely out of left field, and utterly, utterly compelling. Her eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but no rejection, no dismissal. She seemed to genuinely consider my offer, her gaze thoughtful, assessing me not as a customer but as something else. A potential ally, confidant, something more forbidden. "Help," she repeated, her voice laced with a hint of amusement, but also something intrigued. "Well, it does get rather busy in the afternoons. And I am a bit short-handed today." She paused, her eyes searching mine as if trying to gauge my sincerity, my motives. "Are you serious?" I nodded emphatically, my heart pounding with excitement and a delicious tremor of fear. "Completely serious. I'm good with my hands, and I really do admire your flowers. I could water them maybe, arrange bouquets, whatever you need." It was a flimsy excuse, a transparent ploy, but I poured all my sincerity, all my burgeoning desire into my voice, my eyes, my entire being. And to my astonishment, she seemed to buy it. Or perhaps she simply wanted to buy it. Perhaps she too felt a pull, a connection, a flicker of something unexpected. A slow smile spread across her face, a warmer, more genuine smile than before, one that reached her eyes and softened the delicate lines around them. "Well," she said, her voice now laced with a playful lightness, "I suppose I could use a bit of help, especially with the afternoon rush. Are you sure you wouldn't rather be doing homework or hanging out with friends?" She was testing me, I knew, giving me an out, a chance to retreat from this unexpected offer. But retreat was the last thing on my mind. "Homework can wait," I said, my voice firm, decisive, all trace of awkwardness vanishing, replaced by a newfound confidence, a sense of purpose. "And frankly, hanging out here surrounded by all these beautiful flowers sounds a lot more appealing than hanging out with my friends right now." It was a lie, of course. I had no plans to hang out with friends. But it sounded convincing and it played into the narrative I was constructing, the narrative of a young, admiring admirer drawn in by the beauty of her shop, the allure of her flowers, the something else unspoken shimmering between us. Her smile widened further and she let out a soft, melodic laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. "All right then," she said, extending a hand across the counter towards me. Her hand was warm, soft, surprisingly strong, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through me. "Welcome aboard, my name is Elise." "I know," I said before I could stop myself, the words slipping out, a subtle hint of my true knowledge of her, a hint that she was, perhaps, more than just a stranger to me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, her blue eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of something cautious now entering her gaze. She paused, her hand still clasping mine, her grip firm, questioning. "You know," she repeated, her voice softer now, the playfulness receding, replaced by a subtle undercurrent of something. Suspicion, intrigue, or perhaps a dawning realization that this chance encounter was not as random as it seemed. The scent of sunflowers, once sweet and innocent, now seemed to carry a hint of something sharper, something more dangerous, as our hands remained clasped, our eyes locked, the unspoken questions hanging heavy in the fragrant air of Elise's bloom. And I knew with a thrill that both exhilarated and terrified me that the game had truly begun. My father had broken up with his mistress, yes, but I had just taken her hand, and I had no intention of letting go. Wow. Just like life, our stories take unexpected turns, don't they? If you're craving more tales that explore the complexities of relationships, the drama of everyday life, and those moments that truly hook you in, then you're in the right place. Subscribe now and never miss a new video. We're creating stories that resonate, that stir emotions, and that keep you wanting more. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the ride and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep those hearts open and those minds curious.